So we got it. Okay, so it's my turn now to say welcome. I'm so glad to see everybody here this morning, and welcome to this number 5 session for 2023. And I'm Carol Sullivan, the facilitator, with Cindy Madigan as the co-host. So she's going to be muting everybody, but it's nice to you can do it on your own, and then rename yourself with your city, your county, or your league. And if you'd like to add the indigenous lands that you live on, I love that information as well. In the email that I just sent out about an hour ago, I forgot to do it when I first got up this morning. Can't believe I did that, but I did send it out. There was a registration link for Democracy Lobby Week, which is next week. And we're going to be the kickoff for Democracy Lobby Week with a pre-session, and somebody didn't get muted, of how a bill becomes law. And there's going to be lots of useful information coming from the Washington Legislative Information Session. There's a lot of information there, and we're going to have the perfect guide. Her name is Laura Love, and she's the director of the Legislative Information Center, and she'll be able to show us all kinds of places that we didn't even know existed, and it would be useful for us as we navigate that Washington legislative site. So there are other events scheduled for Democracy Lobby Week, starting off with a panel of state legislators on Monday, and then other sessions on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday that deal with more specific issues. You have to look at the registration to see the schedule for that. I've also included in that email the link to the video recording from last week's session, and you can view that along with the others from this year's Act via Zoom on the League of Women Voters YouTube channel. And you just took away my, okay. So there's another thing at the bottom is a flyer for the Citizens Climate Lobby Clean Energy Future series. That's kind of a mouthful there, but it's really going to be interesting. The first session is tomorrow evening at 7 via Zoom with Betty Carteret as the host. She brought us carbon pricing basics last year, and she's going to be speaking later this year at ACT about the Inflation Reduction Act and how it affects regular people like you and I. But this climate Clean Energy Future series, I know it's just going to be really interesting. I'm excited about that. It happens over 5 months, the last Tuesday of every month from January through, I think, May. There's also included some links from Ben Chapman, who's part of Fair Vote Washington, and it includes a little sign up for a little class that he's holding that I hope is going to be recorded because I think it may conflict with some of our Lobby Week things. But right now, I'm really pleased this week to be welcoming Fair Vote Washington's fabulous volunteer, Kit Muehlman, who's going to share what a ranked choice voting presidential primary would mean for us as Washington voters. And to make it even better, we now have a bill number, and it's House Bill 1592 with sponsor Charlotte Mena. And Kit is a member of the Whatcom County League. She joined the league to work on voting rights, specifically ranked choice voting. She's also the volunteer presentations coordinator for Fair Vote Washington, which is the nonprofit group that works to bring ranked choice voting to Washington. We are also probably going to see Ben Chapman, and Chris Mason is also here with ideas about how we can promote this bill. If we have time, there are something that Cindy wants to share with us about a new group that's forming. And if there's really time left, I'll share my easy way to work through the legislative newsletter. But right now, I think we're ready to just turn this over to Kit. I am so excited about this morning because this is something we've been waiting for a while. And I think it's going to be such a wonderful improvement and a great way to introduce ranked choice voting to the voters of Washington State. So Kit.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Carol and Cindy. Yeah, I'm really glad to be here. And I'm also excited about this presidential primaries bill. And I'll explain why. So, and glad to see all of you who show up on Monday mornings to work on these important issues. So, so here we are. I'm Kit Muehlman. I'm a volunteer speaker. And also with us is Chris Mason, who's the volunteer tech lead for Fair Vote Washington, and Ben Chapman, who's the Fair Vote Washington communications director. So, as you all know, Washington State really does pretty well with elections. We have vote by mail, and we have automatic and same-day voter registration, the Washington Voting Rights Act, and that there's still some ways that we lag behind. And ranked choice voting is one way. It can be useful in a lot of ways. And today we're going to focus on ranked choice voting for presidential primary election. So as Carol said, we have a bill number in the House. We don't have the bill number in the Senate yet, but this is for just for the presidential primary. So it would be a statewide change, and our auditors would have support from the state. So no county auditor would be on their own instituting this. And we're looking towards the 2024 presidential primaries. So what the bill does, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. What it does is it implements ranked choice voting for the 2024 presidential primaries. So it must allow voters to rank at least their top 5 candidates. And this will be in either party's presidential primary. It spells out the roles, procedures, and for county auditors and Secretary of State, and it includes educating voters. It provides the Secretary of State the rulemaking authority for certain of these procedures and the problems that it solves. So in 2020, our last presidential primary, 1 in 4 voters in Washington mailed in their ballot for a candidate who dropped out before the day of the election. And these voters were sort of stuck without a say. There's no do-over. If we had ranked choice voting, every voter would have a chance to rank their favorite and then backup choices in case their favorite candidate drops out. So if a voter votes early, the way we're encouraged to, and their candidate drops out, their vote won't be wasted. Now, benefits. There's no more voting for the lesser evil or someone who you think your candidate may not have a really good chance to get delegates, so you choose someone you don't like as much. And ranked choice voting lets you vote for your favorite candidate without worrying about helping a candidate that you like less. It's a proven upgrade. Ranked choice voting is already used in nearly 60 places across the country, and 5 states used it in their 2020 Democratic primaries. And voters have the option to rank their choices. Polls and surveys show that voters overwhelmingly like the ability to rank their candidates. And in the 5 states that used ranked choice voting for presidential primaries in 2020, 75% of the voters ranked at least a second choice. So you remember this? We had a lot of candidates in the Democratic Party in 2020. And like I said, in 2024, we may have a lot of candidates in the Republican Party. Washington is a vote by mail state. So as we're encouraged to get our ballots in early, what happens if the candidates withdraw between the time you mail in your ballot and the election day? So back to here in 2020, almost 400,000 votes were cast for candidates who dropped out before the election day. And that's more than 25% of the votes in the Democratic primary. So here's this second column here is the list of candidates who dropped out. Well, Tulsi Gabbard was still in the running, but she didn't get enough votes to get a delegate. So these are the number of votes at the bottom in the red. 397,000 and more votes were not used for delegates. and they didn't have any say in the Washington Democratic delegates. So to review, what is ranked choice voting? So when we explain ranked choice voting, we find it best to describe it from the voter's viewpoint, instead of going right into how things are counted, to talk about how a voter will mark the ballot. Let me say it's a simple improvement to the ballot. Voters rank the candidates in the order they prefer: first choice, second choice, and so on. And we're going to also review with food election. So here are the candidates. I will put a link in the chat in just a minute for this election. It's pumpkin pie, pumpkin spice cake, apple pie, apple crumble, pumpkin pie, zucchini cake, chocolate zucchini cake, and pumpkin spice latte. So let me, whoops. Now, how do I, sorry about this. Every time it seems a little different. Okay. So start thinking about which ones you want while I find the link. Does anyone have any questions while I'm getting this together?
There was one question in the chat.
Yeah, great.
And
I posted the link.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Okay, so there's a link in the chat. If you click that link, it should take you to a ballot that looks like
fall desserts.
fall desserts. You got it? Great.
We click on that.
Yeah, click on that. Click on the fall desserts, and a ballot should come up. This one has a lot of candidates, sort of like the presidential primary. If you rank four or five candidates, that should be enough. And then, but you can rank them all if you want, or just one if that's all you want. And then click submit and come back to the Zoom room.
The question had to do with, are the candidates all at once or per party? And I think I answered it in the chat. You might want to check to be sure, but both parties are on the same ballot. You remember in 2020, the Democratic side of the ballot had numerous candidates and the Republican side had one. So that's, the ballot is the same ballot, but you can only vote for one party. You can't cross your votes. You have to, don't you have to sign someplace?
That's right, Carol. That's right, Carol. You have to pick a party it's a party primary. It's not really an election. It's a party primary, and we give this information to the parties, and then they do with it what they want. So yeah.
And on this ballot, we can't rank, let's say, pumpkin pie 5 times, can we? I mean, we can't just go right across and say it's my first, second, third, fourth, and fifth choice, which it probably would have been for me, at least as a child.
Right. Well, in this app, I'm just using an internet app. This is not an official election form, and this app won't let you do that. If you did it on a paper ballot, it wouldn't help any, because if your candidate gets eliminated, then you don't have a backup choice. So it's not like we're adding up across the line. Yeah. Okay. I think we're ready. Everybody ready? I'm ready.
Am I the only one that has a screen showing 3 very nice people, but no ballots?
You might be. I don't know, Jim, you might have voted in this before too. That might be. I know you've been to a number of presentations. It might be that it's not letting you have that. But let's go ahead and look at what happens with this election. So here's the ballot. It's got 7 candidates, quite a lot. So we'll go to the first round. On the first round, we're going to look at all the first choice votes, only the first choice votes. So we're looking in a ranked choice election for one candidate to cross the line on the right all the way across 50%. And no candidate has done that. So in a ranked choice election, we look for the candidate with the least amount of votes. They can't win, So that's pumpkin spice latte has, oh, it picked up a vote that from the last time I used this election. There are a lot of votes in here because I've used the election many times. So pumpkin spice latte, unfortunately, is getting eliminated. Those 2 voters, though, get their next choice counted. So we'll go to round 2 and see where those 2 votes go. They went to pumpkin pie and apple pie. We still don't have 50%, so we eliminate the next.
Wait, Kit, I don't see the round 2 on there. Do you have a screen for that?
Okay, I'll go back to round 1. So right at the top here, do you see round 1 at the top?
Yeah.
Okay, fall dessert. See, there's just 2 little tiny pink votes. So I'm going to click this, and one goes to apple pie and one goes to pumpkin pie. Do you see those little pink votes right here? This is hard to tell, but it's there.
So I'm seeing Kit's sharing of her screen. So if you're done voting, you can come back to the Zoom and watch what
Oh,
she's.
that's the problem.
Oh,
Okay,
thank you,
that's the
Chris.
problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I'm so glad you're here. This is great. Okay.
Wait, I'm afraid I'll totally leave.
Okay, now you're seeing round 2 on my screen.
I see it now. Yes, thank
Great.
you.
Thank
This
you for
operates error here.
speaking up, because that would be really mystifying. Okay, so we're going to go to round 3, eliminate pumpkin spice cake, and go to round 3. And pumpkin spice cake split. Those voters split all over. So apple crumble gets eliminated. And the people who had pumpkin spice, those 3 voters as their first vote, now they get their third place vote counted, but they don't get, they're not told to just go home. They still have a voice. And we still don't have a winner. So pecan pie gets eliminated. And we still don't have a winner. So either chocolate cake or chocolate zucchini cake or apple pie is going to get eliminated. We have so few voters. We had a tie, so we're going to have to flip a coin. And oh my goodness, it was a squeaker, but apple pie won. So that's how a ranked choice election would work. If you're looking for one winner, I'm going to go back a few rounds. If we're looking for, say, 3 winners, we're looking for, if it's a presidential primary, the candidates need to cross a certain threshold to get delegates. So it might be that the top 3.
Threshold.
It depends on the party.
Can you go back to round 2?
Go back to round 2.
Yeah. So for the Democratic Party, they traditionally, it's 15%. So, right. So we'll see right now.
Oh,
There's pumpkin spice cake only had 9%. So that's not enough to get a delegate. So they would need to be eliminated. So if you go one more, now every of the candidate listed here has more than 15%. And so these would all be delegate earning candidates. And then the delegate allocation process is to proportionally assign a number of delegates based upon how much of the overall vote these 5 candidates received. And then that's how many delegates they would be assigned to go to the national convention.
And when you say that, Chris, you mean like your vote is kind of literally split into proportions in pieces?
No, not your vote,
but everybody.
The total number of votes, right? So I'm trying to think how we would look at this. So 19 votes out of, Kit, do you know where the total is in terms of votes? It's behind that little, I just don't know what the total number of votes is, but whatever percentage, I guess it's 16%, isn't it? So yeah, so that's right. So so apple crumble would get 16% of the delegates. And pecan pie would get 18% of the delegates, and apple pie would get 19% of the delegates, and so on. Right?
And that's because to the convention, the state gets a certain percentage based on their population, their democratic vote, and on, starting at the precinct level.
Yes, and there are the whatever they call it, the super delegates is a word that's used, but it's not official word. But basically, there are delegates that are supposed to vote specifically for these candidates, and then there are delegates from our state party apparatus that get to vote for whoever they want, right? There's a combination of delegates that from our state. All right, I think.
Thank you, Chris. That was very helpful. I learned something.
We have a hand up from, thank you, Joanne. I saw your hand up and I hadn't quite gotten the opportunity, but Marcia, do you have a question?
I do. How easy is this to implement? How long does it take to for the count to happen is my question, the logistics on it, because it sounds complicated, and maybe a computer can just whip this right off, but I don't know that.
Go ahead, Chris.
All right, so the bill stipulates that all of the counties will send out the ballots like the way they do now. They'll bring them back to the auditor's offices in all the counties. They will run them through their ballot counting machines like we do with any regular election. And then they will take the electronic information and transmit that to the Secretary of State. And for this one election, the Secretary of State's computers will actually do a combined tabulation. So what we just watched of those rounds, that will be done in software at the Secretary of State's office. It happens. So I've watched, I don't know if you're familiar, Maine uses ranked choice voting for their representatives to Congress. So I watched them, and I also watched when they did it in Alaska recently, and they literally just go and they push the button and there's the results, right? So, I mean, it's once the things are all processed and transmitted, it's almost instant.
And then Alpana, did you have a question?
I do. Well, good to see you again. Well, my question was, how do people once voted, is counted, and what is the basis of counting? Is that do they follow according to the popular vote?
So this is not
Little confusing.
this is basically the same way that we did the election last time, that this is for the primary, right? And the primary is how the Washington state tells the Democratic or Republican national committees at their convention who to nominate as the candidate for that party at the general election. So it is a popular vote inside Washington that we are talking about, yes, but it is not talking about the popular vote versus the Electoral College. That is a completely different discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Joanne, it looks like she has another question for us. Go ahead, Joanne. Joanne, okay, thank you.
So my question is, it sort of consistently has to do with, and I've heard other people nationally that recognize that while there are advantages to ranked choice voting, this is one of the disadvantages that I'm going to address. That, for instance, if that one that you eliminated at the bottom, well, it didn't do well in the first round, if it had been a very popular second choice, it wouldn't be there for the second choice. And it's hard to see that some votes were lost then. I mean, if it had been a very popular second choice, or somebody had it as a second choice, it would not show up because it was eliminated in the first round. And that can happen.
Want to take this one, Ben?
Yeah, sure. So that's a great question, and it's it's a fair question. Different people look for different things out of their voting systems. One of the reasons that I think ranked choice voting is so exciting is because it requires candidates to have a lot of first choice votes. So you can't just win by being everybody's second choice under ranked choice voting. You have to have some people who are really excited about you. Under our current system, all you have to have is a few people who are really excited for you, and ranked choice voting makes you extend your base a little further. But yeah, Joanna, to your question, yeah, under ranked choice voting, candidates do have to have enough first choice support to make sure they don't get eliminated in those first.
But it's a little bit just, so that sort of dissuades you from, oh, you can just go out here and like, you really like this person, but they don't have a very good chance. But okay, go ahead and give them your first choice vote, when really there's another candidate that you think has a much better chance, or somebody you would like just as well, but they don't have this movement behind them, but a lot of people like them and they're in the second choice. Anyway, I'm just saying that every system has its weakness, and we might as well admit there are some weaknesses in ranked choice voting.
Yeah, Chris, unmute yourself, Chris. Yeah.
I did. So Joanne, what you just mentioned actually is slightly different, which is that you can always say, even though I know that this candidate may not be super viable, I can always give them my first choice, and without having to worry about it, because I can also pick my second and third choices as my backups. So there is no incentive to not give your first choice. It's only if the candidate that you pick first gets eliminated that we will look at your second choice. So there's a slight.
That's
slight
what I'm
difference.
saying. If my first choice candidate doesn't get through, but the second choice, a lot of people chose this other person as the second choice. And I think it happens more when you have a lot of candidates, that there are some sort of mainstream candidates that a lot of people might say are second choices, but in the meantime, they'll sort of vote for their quirky favorite in ranked choice voting. And that second choice could be lost because it was eliminated in the first round.
Yeah, Joanna, there was a study that the Washington League of Women Voters did in 2000 that addressed this issue of, they call it strategic voting, where you have to think about who's going to get where and how far and such. And we're really used to thinking that way because the method of voting that we use right now is designed perfectly for strategic voting. And so that's the way we think. And this League of Women Voters study from Washington in 2000, and another one in Oregon in 20.
So I'm not going to argue with you because
Yeah,
I'm aware of that.
I'd love to send you these studies. I'd love to send you.
I have read that study, but it's like, just recognize that is a possibility, and strategic voting would still be on your mind, because if you vote for a candidate that's eliminated in both the first and if your candidate is eliminated in both the first and second rounds, your vote is lost.
Yeah, Joanna, if you'd like, I think I'm starting to understand kind of what you're talking about. But if you want to chat more, shoot me an email. I'll put my email in the chat, because I think it's important. And I think we all, Chris and I, can all agree, ranked choice voting isn't a perfect system. All we're talking about is upgrading the system we currently have. And we can even go further after ranked choice voting to make our elections even better. So it's not perfect, and nobody thinks it is perfect, but we
Maybe
can do a
I'll
lot better.
email you the other studies that talked about that. There are a lot of pros to ranked choice voting, but there are some cons.
And I'm going to interrupt at this point to just go back to the chat with a easy question to answer. Deborah asked, will a voter be obliged to record a vote for more than one candidate? And in parentheses, she put no spoiled ballots for failure to mark a certain number.
That there's no spoiled ballots if you only mark one candidate. Correct. Yes. Yes. Washington's a voter intent state. So the auditors make every effort to make sure that they understand what the voter was trying to do and count the votes. That's a strong piece of misinformation that's going around, that if you don't rank all the candidates, they throw your ballot away. But that is not true. That is not true. You can rank one candidate and your vote will count as long as that candidate is in the running.
Okay, thank you. And I know Jim has a question.
Mhm. Jim.
Okay, mine is on the same vein, and it goes just a little bit further. Will this bill, House Bill 5092, will it name the instruction that goes on the ballot? That is to say, you open the ballot and it says, vote for at least one candidate, vote for, mark, what instruction will the people be given so that they know exactly what they are to do? And does the bill state that instruction?
So the bill itself does not include the language to be put on the ballot. It tells the Secretary of State to come up with the correct or best information. And there's been some studies by the Center for Civic Design has a report that has its wonderful information about the best way to put information and how to lay out a ballot for ranked choice voting.
Okay, thank you.
There's one more question. Is the Secretary of State open to doing an analysis of ranked choice voting?
I think we'd
the
have to ask the Secretary of State.
Is required by law to institute this
I'd be
method.
curious what you mean by an analysis, but we don't know what what kind of analysis. You're just talking about understanding it better?
This is Aruna. My question was about, you mentioned that the county auditors would, do the first counting as usual, and then when the ranked choice voting is being used, the Secretary of State's computer system or whatever system would do the analysis. And that's what I wanted to know. Do we have Secretary of State on board as far as doing this additional work? Thank you.
Dan?
That's a great question. So the Secretary of State the Secretary of State's office would be basically required by law to follow the instructions of the bill or the legislation. We are still working on talking with Secretary Steve Hobbs about how he wants to be part of writing this legislation. And it's taken a little bit it always with ranked choice voting, it takes a little bit of time to get election officials to come on board with ranked choice voting because it requires them to change how they do their jobs. Sometimes that's kind of scary. It's also really hard to be an election official right now. So election officials are under a lot of pressure, and we totally understand that. But when we have time to sit down with people and really explain to them what ranked choice voting would mean and tell them that it's tested and it's proven, then generally we can get folks on board. So we still have a bit of work to do on that with Secretary Hobbs, but I think I'm optimistic that he'll come around.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So while I have Bennett here, I'd like to point out that Ranked choice voting has been used in presidential primaries in 5 states in 2020. Hawaii, this little tiny bit down at the bottom, Alaska, Nevada, Wyoming, and Kansas. So the Democratic Party used ranked choice voting for the presidential primary, and 75% of the voters marked more than one candidate. So I think we still have some more questions here. Joanna asked, does the bill allow for, let's say, the top 5 rather than going one by one? I don't know exactly what you mean like that. So the top 5 was part of the local options bill that we was in the legislature last year. And that was for a primary for a state office that would primary would get us to 5 people, and then those 5 people, if there were that many, and then
Okay, so I'll just explain. So in Seattle, we passed ranked choice voting, and because it's very difficult to go through all the different things, and sometimes we have 20 candidates for mayor or something. It allows them to say, we'll just take the top 5 and go through them.
Right. So that would be a local or a state election or local election, and that would not carry over to the presidential primaries because
so the presidential primary, especially for the Democrats, is just looking at the percentages anyway. So it seems like, it's a good tool for that type of allocation, because you just see how many people got first choice votes. Really, that's all what it is.
Well, and the people who voted for candidates who did not have enough first choice votes get their second choice counted.
So one thing, I don't know how many people here who have participated in a caucus before we did primaries, right? The Washington state used to be a caucus state. So the president, the party the party selection process was where you went to a stadium or whatever, and you all collected in different corners for your candidate that you liked. And then they added up all the people who were there, how many were there. And if the group in this corner on the right hand side wasn't enough people in that corner to get their candidate some delegates, then they were told, all right, you guys have to go find a different group of people in a different corner for a different candidate. And then they would count them again, and they would just keep doing that until all of the groups had their candidate had gotten enough votes in that room so that they were earning delegates. So I like to say that ranked choice voting is basically a caucus on paper. It's just the way for you as the voter to provide your intent about how you would want to go through that process. So as candidates are eliminated because if they don't earn enough delegates, you can say, well, okay, then I would go over to this group. And that's just how I think it translates pretty well from that old caucus process to doing it electronically. And this bill is only about primary, the presidential primary. And so I'd go back to that very first question about, is this all at the same time or only one party? And it was said, but it's just for a party. So there will be, the ballot will have each party's section, and you will still have to sign the outside and say, I identify with that party. I'm only voting in that party's section of the ballot. And then the results are calculated by the Secretary of State, but then they are just given to the party for the party to then use for their process.
And Vicky earlier in the chat said education is needed. Yes, education is needed. Yes.
But I'd like to add that I don't think ranked choice is the difficult part. We just had a perfectly easy time ranking our fall desserts. And that's basically all you have to know about when you're faced with a ballot. You just have to know which candidate you want first, which is your second choice. And if you don't want anybody other than that first choice, you stick with that. And then you can just go on for up to maybe 5 choices. And then the computers take care of the rest of it. And we just trust right now that tabulation is done accurately. And I think that it'll happen. The computers can do it so much easier. Like Chris said, just push a button and there it is. It'll do it. We don't have to think through too much what happens, except to know that our votes are going to count more. If you were one of the people, not 25%, if you happen to vote for Democrat and you chose somebody and you mailed off your ballot and then later found out your candidate was no longer running, you were really disappointed. But if we'd had ranked choice voting then, you could have had a second or third choice and you said, well, I liked Ike, but I'm okay with Mike or whoever. So that's kind of my take on it. And I'll stop talking now and let it get back to the experts. I just happen to support ranked choice voting. So
Thanks, Carol.
sorry.
That's okay. So Laura asked again if you can rank Democratic and Republican candidates. Her county almost never has more than one Democratic candidate. So remember this year, the bill is for the presidential primaries. And last presidential primary, you had, I forget what it is, 12, 15 candidates in the Democratic presidential primary. This bill is not for local elections.
So Deborah, oh, sorry, Jim, you had another question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, there was mention about each political party would have their own ballot page. Is that what I was hearing? And if so, how many political parties will there be certified? You know, the 4 usually thought of, or adding a whole bunch more?
So none of that would change from what we have now in terms of whether a party gets the designation of a major political party and earns the ability to get a space on a ballot. The thing to remember is this really only needs to happen if that party has more than it's actually more than 2 candidates or more than 1 candidate, right? So it's unlikely that a Green or Libertarian Party, national party, is going to actually put forward, you know, a lot of candidates in terms of historically basic, you know, that hasn't really been the case. Also, a lot of times we have the scenario which we've had in 2020 where the incumbent from one side is the only candidate for that party. So, you know, there's no ranking that's going to happen. So I think you're probably most likely only going to see the 2 main parties on your ballot. And I don't know if it's a separate page, but it is a separate section. And then I would just jump to Deborah had a question about how will candidates who have recently dropped out be handled. So, I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons that we want to see this happen in Washington is that our timing of our primary happens to be a week after Super Tuesday. And that's when a lot of candidates happen to drop out and our ballots have already been mailed. So that's why people would vote, they'd be good citizens, they send their ballot in and then the people drop out, right? So the way that it is handled in the counting of ballots is every candidate who has dropped out, who is no longer eligible to receive your vote, is eliminated in rounds of elimination. I don't know if it'd probably all be bulk eliminated at the same time. And then anybody who voted for those candidates as their first choice would have their second choice looked at on down the line until they have marked for somebody who's still an eligible candidate.
Yeah, if you think back to 2020, so many people just voted for a candidate who would drop out, and they got absolutely no say. They mailed in their ballot early exactly like they were supposed to, and then had no say in who was actually the nominee that year. And no fault of their own. But ranked choice voting would fix that.
Ben, would you tell us about the classes that you're offering, the workshops?
Yes, I would love to. So let me find you all a link, and I'm going to put this in the chat.
So Ben is a tremendous coach in letter writing and in talking, and I found him to be a great editor and cheerleader, and he's just, yeah, so go.
Well, thanks, Kit.
It's also in the email from this morning, Ben, at the link. So they've got it both ways.
Oh, great. Yes, thank you. So you have the link to this workshop. Basically, here's our problem. We know there's a lot of people who want to see this bill passed. We know it's so important to so many different people, but we have to tell legislators why it's important. And it's great to write your legislators an email. That's a big deal. You should do that. But there's also a pretty unique way to take part in this bill, and that's by making direct-to-camera videos. You are all on Zoom right now. You know how to talk into a camera. If you FaceTime somebody, you know how to talk into a camera. If you've taken a selfie, you know how to make yourself look good on a camera. So you all already have the skills to make these happen. So the next thing to do is you can film your direct-to-camera video. We can give you a script with some personalized info on what you want to say, and then you film your video. You can send it on over to us. You can even send it to your legislator. And once you do that, you'll have made your case in a very personal, very human way, and shown that there's actual faces behind this movement. And so that's what this direct-to-camera video is about. It's about showing the actual people behind the actual people who support ranked choice voting, and a little bit about why they support ranked choice voting. So come to that workshop if you'd like to work on your ranked choice voting pitch. Thank you very much, Kit.
Are there any more questions, or should we turn this back over to Carol to squeeze in a few more subjects?
Cindy, did you want to come in at this point? Cindy, you're muted. She did a good job of muting everybody, including yourself. Okay.
Thank you. So I'm putting in another plug for the Democracy Lobby Week that's coming up. It's a chance to meet with your legislators. And I'm also going to point out on Wednesday evening program, those of you who are Fixed Democracy First regular watchers will see that's the Wednesday time for the Democracy Happy Hour hosted by Fixed Democracy First. We're going to do a couple of sessions deep diving. One of them is going to be about using proportional ranked choice voting for better representation. And as Kit mentioned, the league did a study, our state league did a study in 2000, and there's also been studies done in Oregon, and Maine is currently doing a study on proportional representation. So this is a much different topic than the presidential primary that we're talking about today, but I just wanted to let you know that we're also planning, if there's interest, to start an affinity group so that we as league members can learn from other leagues across the state on how they are studying this issue, analyzing it, and helping educate the voters, because that's also a big part that many of the leagues have done across the state in Alaska and Maine to make this transition successful. And so just wanting to let people know about that, and hopefully you can join in on that session and learn more about our plans for an affinity group.
And Cindy, did you mean just across the state or did you mean across the nation? Because I thought the plan was to bring people from.
I meant across the nation.
Yes,
I
thought
meant
so.
across the nation in other states, across the nation. Thank you very much, Carol, for that clarification.
Okay.
Yes.
Things that are actually in process now and then things that they're planning. So this is really going to encompass a nationwide conversation. I'm real excited about this. Another chance for a Zoom meeting. Who can't be excited about that? Anyway, so I have something that I'd like to share too, if I remember where share screen is. I wanted to show you real quickly how I view going through the newsletter, because there's a lot of action that can be taken there, and it can be kind of time consuming, but I found what I think is a quicker way to do it. Can I share it real quickly? Okay, well, let's see if I can do that. It says share, and then I can get to my, so here's the, is it sharing?
Yes, yes, we
Wow,
see
how
it.
about that? So this is the email that I got. So, and I've gone just to this very first page. The action alerts are there. They're the ones who want you to do first, but then there's a whole bunch of all these little yellow triangles down here. And I did them up last night until the last two. So let's see what's in criminal justice. And I'm going to not click on that, but I'm going to go to the issue overview. And hopefully it gets me there. This isn't real encouraging. Come on. Okay, so this is criminal justice. And this is where we do the bill tracking. This is not the weekly report. This is the bill tracking. But look, now instead of yellow triangles, oh my gosh, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Whoa, we're going to just do a couple. I'll just start with the first two. And if I click on this take action button, I'm assuming they're going to be, we'll find out. Oh my gosh, look at this. They want us to sign in pro. If they ever wanted us to sign in con, I'd be in trouble. But look how easy this is, especially if you have this fill in the blanks thing. Do not put anything in organization. You're speaking for yourself when you do this, and you are not a robot. That's done. Now I need to go back to this again, and I can do the second one. And look at, this is another bill. I'm not even going to read it. I could read it, but right now I'm not going to. I am assuming that Heather Kelly and Deb Carson's, are we in criminal justice? I think they're the ones who are following these bills. If they want us to sign in pro, I'm taking their word for it. I can also say that I studied the issue pages that they have, and I do agree with what they say. Again, it's easy to go back. So I'll do one more and then I'll be done for this. Remember that I've done 3, but you can do this. The easy way to do it, if you've got this done, I don't know how long it took me, but not being a robot, it makes it pretty easy for someone who's really not a robot and doesn't know much about this. And I want to get back to the Zoom meeting. Uh-oh, you're there someplace. Stop share and maybe I'll get to it. Okay, is that better? So it's very simple if you just go to that grid section, because everything's listed right there and you can just keep going back and forth through the tabs and go through it very quickly. The first time I did it, I had to download the weekly report. The same information is there. If you need more information, it's there in the weekly reports. But the fast way is just through the grid and the red triangles each week. Enough said about that? Yeah. Okay. So if there are no further questions, oh shoot, my son's calling me. This is probably a good place to stop then. So we stop.
Well, let's take a question from Deborah.
Okay, I'm gonna
go ahead, Carol.
Calling is,
Yeah.
I'll be here, but not quite.
Yeah. Okay. Deborah, go ahead.
Yeah, my question was about how you get that page to fill in all of your fields. I find that if I type the first letter of what I already have in there, it'll do it, but I have to do each field separately. That was very clever. It would save a lot of time if I could do them all at once, but I didn't quite see while she was doing it, but she's not listening to this question.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of responses in the chat. It kind of depends on your browser. Each browser is a little differently.
Oh,
Yeah. I don't know if anybody else has more technical
Yeah.
experience with getting that to work.
I've
Honestly,
certainly done it.
I don't know how
I've done
I
it
set
often.
autofill. I can't explain that to you, but maybe Chris, can you tell us how we did that? But go off mute.
Well,
Deborah has a question too.
yeah, it's a thing. Autofill is a setting you can decide to allow or not allow in your browser. It's funny, I have one browser works and the other one doesn't. So it's something that would take a little bit of looking into to figure out, because I know people, you can turn it off and then it just is not there. So it's,
Would it
sorry, I
be in
don't have
settings? Is it normally in settings?
it depends on if you're using Safari or Chrome or whatever, right? They're all different. So, but yeah, it would be a setting, a preference for your browser.
And I'm sorry, I can't help you more with that. I just know it works. Once you have it set up, it is so quick. I mean, I saved the last two because I wanted to demonstrate this morning, but I could have done them easily. And it just is so fast. I'm so glad I learned this because it took me all of last year and 2 other weeks of this to figure it out. So I just thought I'd share that with you. Okay, it does look like let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. Deborah had a question and then Laura has one as well. Laura, would you unmute and ask your question, please?
Okay. It's just a comment. Carol, we've discussed this before, that if they're trying to get a bill out of committee, like on the email you were actually using from last night, if your legislators are not on that committee, it pops back and says, sorry, your legislators aren't on this committee. And which I don't understand. I mean, I've got that it would help if my legislators were on committee, but it's not like my legislators are sitting there going, I'm sorry, Lori, it's not a part of my district. I don't have to listen to her, especially
Right.
if they're doing something statewide that's important.
Yes, and when we get to the point where we're asking people to support a floor vote, or with the case of 5082, the advisory votes, we ask for support for the bill to get it, make your legislators aware that it's going to be up for a vote, because we want them to nudge their colleagues to get it to vote. And that's what we did with the 5082. But then when we want the floor vote, then telling your own legislator, either your senator or your representatives, and you can narrow it down to either the representatives or the one senator, then coming directly from the constituents is appropriate. But you're right, so right, Laura, about if they're not on the committee. You could also take the time to look up the committee members and send them an email asking for support of a particular vote out of committee, just as a member of the committee. They can respond as a member of a committee. We also get that with that sign in pro thing, because they do pay attention to that. Every committee hearing, the chair will ask, well, how many people signed in pro? How many people signed in con? And they make that announcement so that they know as a committee if people in the state are behind a piece of legislation or not. Did that answer, Chris? Unmute. Yeah.
So the Take Action Network website is a pretty powerful tool if you're not using that. And it has graphic that literally shows you the current committee that the bill is in, and it will highlight whether one of your legislators is on that committee, which is pretty cool to help you with that. And you're right, it's frustrating that your representatives will come back and say, well, that bill's in the Senate and I'm in the House, so I don't need to think about it right now, right? You get that response, or you get the response of, I'm not going to think about it because it hasn't come to a floor vote, right? I'm not on the committee that's looking at it right now. So they will give you those responses. But I think, like Carol said, if you basically it depends upon what you're asking, right? If you say, please vote for this, they're going to say, I can't. But if you say, this bill is important to me, can you support it? When it comes in front of you, will you please support it? Things like that. I think it might make a difference on how you say it.
Right, but this was a system that's in the newsletter that they can't even get it out of the committee. And I've got that if my person were on the committee, that's a more powerful, hey, Judy, cough it up. But to sit there and have the machine just kick it all back, it's like, oh, we have no one to deliver it to. We can't, oh my goodness. Versus if we're all piling in from everywhere, just like you would with a pro or a con, and saying, hey, get this thing off out of committee so people can vote on it, I think it would be even more powerful. My opinion.
I hear you on that. Okay, so it is 11 o'clock and we've covered a lot of territory today. And I can see there are lots of questions about the presidential primaries, but just remember, it's presidential primaries. It's not local options. It's a whole different, we're talking apples to oranges kind of. And I think the league does support ranked choice voting in presidential primaries for that standalone election. So let's kind of, wrap our heads around it, that it's its own thing. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you attending. Come back next week when we are the kickoff for Democracy Lobby Week with the great guide, Laura Love, who's going to lead us through the wonderful resource that is the Washington Legislative Information Center. It's got lots of information, but you need a guide. See you next week then. Thank you. Bye now.